Hello and welcome to my Blender Iceberg video. Today, I'm in Antarctica so we can take a look at this cool Blender Iceberg image I found online. We will be taking a look at every entry and I'll be doing my best to explain them. The original list that I took heavy inspiration from was uploaded to the Blender Meme subreddit by Noah the Animator. I will leave a link to that post below if you're interested. For clarity, all the entries I found on the original list will be white, and the ones that I added or edited will be orange. Make sure you stick around to the end, because some of these later entries are really interesting, and even if you've been using Blender for a long time, I'll bet you haven't heard of some of these. With that out of the way, let's get into the list. Andrew Price, aka Blender Guru, aka the Donut Man, is a popular Blender YouTuber who has made one of the most iconic Blender tutorials ever. Over the course of his series, he teaches beginners how to create a donut in Blender. The first version of this tutorial was created all the way back in September 2019 and was meant for Blender 2.8. Since then, he has recreated his iconic donut tutorial 2 more times. One in December 2021 that was made for Blender 3.0, and one that came out in November 2023 for Blender 4.0. Shortcuts are keybinds in Blender that save a massive amount of time when modeling. They're usually some of the first thing new Blender users learn. Some of the most common shortcuts people use are G for moving objects, R for rotating objects, S for scaling objects, E for extruding objects, X for deleting objects, Shift D for duplicating objects, and Tab for switching between object and edit mode. There are a lot more shortcuts in Blender that aren't this basic and are very complicated to learn and used for very specific purposes. Modifiers are non-destructive operations that alter an object's properties without permanently changing them. They allow for complex things to be done while still allowing you to remove or change the modifier later, and they save a ton of time. For example, if I wanted there to be 50 cubes in this scene, instead of duplicating the cube 50 times, which is essentially torture, I could just simply apply an array modifier to the cube and then just change how many cubes I want in the array modifier settings. Some of the most popular modifiers include the array modifier that helps create multiple objects, subdivision that splits a mesh's face into more faces allowing for smoother models, the bevel modifier that rounds corners, the solidify modifier that adds thickness to geometry, and the mirror modifier that mirrors an object. Suzanne is the name of the monkey head mesh added to Blender in version 2.25 in February. It was created by Willem Paul van Overbruggen? I hope I said that right. Who named it after the orangutan in the Kevin Smith film Jay and the Silent Bob? Suzanne remains in Blender today as an Easter egg. But unlike other primitive shapes in Blender, Suzanne has much more complex geometry, making it useful for testing things like materials, shaders, animations, rigs, and lighting setups. As a way to stress test Blender's power and capabilities, the Blender Foundation challenged the community's most talented artists to make a 3D animated short film. This project was given the codename Project Orange and began in 2005. The film was released with the name Elephant's Dream a year later in 2006. Following the success of the film, the Blender Institute was established with the intention of creating open source projects in Blender. Since then, they've released a few more films, such as Big Buck Bunny in 2008, Tears of Steel in 2012, Spring in 2019, and then Sprite Fight in 2021. Grease Pencil is a Blender object that allows you to draw 2D elements in Blender's 3D space. I didn't know this, but it was actually added to Blender all the way back in 2008 as a simple annotation tool, but then over time it evolved into a fully fledged 2D vector animation tool, becoming its own dedicated object type in Blender 2.8. Fun fact, the outlines in the environment I made for the intro of this video were actually used making Grease Pencil. Rigify is a Blender add-on that helps automate the creation of character rigs. After downloading the add-on, you can easily add and edit present rigs for animating. It saves animators a ton of time compared to manually making a rig from scratch. Import Images Planes was an add-on for Blender that allowed you to easily add images downloaded from places like Google into planes that had actual geometry. It was originally an add-on that you had to manually enable, but since Blender 4.2, it's been integrated into Blender itself. Video Sequence Editor is the name of Blender's built-in video editor. It allows for basic video editing actions like video cuts, while also being able to perform some more complex things like color grading. It's not really seen as a replacement to larger, more fleshed out editing softwares like DaVinci or CapCut, but it has its uses since it's built right into Blender. Z-Fighting is a rendering artifact in 3D graphics that occurs when two or more faces have similar distances to the camera. Specifically, it happens because the graphic card can't determine which polygon should be rendered on top, leading to a visual artifact. Originally, right-click was used to select objects in Blender. This was changed to left-click in the release version 2.8, and this change was made because left-click is considered the standard for a wide range of 3D modeling software. Some OG Blender users never got used to this change, and still uses right-click to select objects. Blender Game Engine was a real-time interactive content creation tool built within Blender. It allowed users to create games and other interactive applications. It used Python for scripting, however it also had a visual node scripting system. The Blender Game Engine was later dropped in Blender 2.8 due to the fact its capabilities weren't powerful as other mainstream game engines at the time. It was also difficult to simultaneously update Blender and the game engine, so eventually the Blender Foundation was just like, screw this, let's just stick with 3D modeling. Blender was originally made as an in-house 3D modeling program for the Dutch animation studio Neogen in the late 1990s. In January 1998, Blender was released publicly. In 2002, the company behind Blender went bankrupt and was left without funding. The creator, Todd Rosendahl, established the nonprofit Blender Foundation in May of 2002 and used crowdfunding to launch 100,000 euros to buy back Blender's source code. This is most likely a reference to Adobe joining the Blender Development Fund as a corporate gold member. There have also been talks and speculations of Adobe eventually buying Blender, which scares many Blender users because Blender is open source and free. And well, we know that Adobe loves making their products cost a lot of money and not open source, so yeah. But don't worry, I did a little research and there are no plans for Adobe to start owning Blender anytime soon, hopefully. This is a reference to a much older Blender version with a much different UI and limited features compared to modern Blender. These versions were released between 2007 and 2009, and it shows. From what I could find, a big part of what was added in these earlier versions was to do with animation and armatures, and also stuff like physics and simulations. The 2.8 update to Blender made significant changes to the UI compared to 2.7, which affected people's workflow, and there were a lot of people upset and confused by the new UI changes. It was such a big overhaul The users debated on if it should just be update 3.0 or not. I really couldn't find any information on this entry and have no idea what it's talking about. I did a little searching around and I couldn't find anything about this topic, and I don't have any idea why it's on the list. The only thought I have is maybe Andrew Price has referenced him before in a video or has shown his books before in a video. I don't know. I also really couldn't find any definitive information about this one. But if I had to guess, it's probably a meme reference to the fact that a lot of Blender add-ons and different things in Blender cost money. And the fact that even if it is a free and open source software, someone is having to pay for it, namely through supports and donations. But it's definitely true that if you start using Blender a lot and start creating a lot of things, you'll definitely want to spend some money to pick up a few add-ons to make your life easier. This was a really cool entry, and I'm glad I added this to the list. When I was researching this list, I actually found out that the images on Blender's splash screen, like the little pop-up that opens up when you open the program, are actually downloadable blend files. You can actually download these files from the Blender website and open them up on your computer. But yeah, so this is a really cool and obscure fact, and even if you have been using Blender for a while, I bet you didn't know this existed. This is most likely a nod to what people do when they boot up a blend file for the first time. If you don't know, every time you open up a blend file and start with a completely new scene, they give you a few basic objects. They give you a light, a camera, and a default cube. This has kind of become a meme in the community that whenever you start a new blend file, you have to delete the default cube and kill it. There have been occasions where I've started a new Blender scene, killed the default cube, and then realized I needed a cube to start whatever I was modeling to re-add a cube. Well, that's the end of the video. Thanks for sticking around to the end. If you like this kind of content and want to see more of it in the future, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing. Thanks for watching.